Hey, what's up? It's me, Richard, and I'm here with another video. And today I'll be looking at math in another math class, and we'll be looking at indices. So, what are indices anyway? What is this thing that we're talking about? Well, indices is actually the plural of index, and an index or power is a small floating number that appears after a number or letter. Indices shows how many times a number or letter has been multiplied by itself. For example, the 2 in x squared, or the 3 in and 4 in x cubed y to the fourth. So terms of the same indices can be added. So their entire, if there are multiple unknown variables within the term, then all of those indices need to match, or else we won't be able to add them. For example, x squared plus 2x squared can be added. We add the number, that's the constant, or and keep the term or the index. So x squared plus 2x squared is equal to 3x squared. So let's try and understand indices. So the index of a number tells us how many times it is multiplied by itself, as we said before. For example, x squared is equal to x times x, right? So when a letter is next to another letter, it means that we multiply that letter. So xy means x times y. For example, x times y squared is equal to x times y times y. So a number next to a letter means that it multiplies that letter. For example, 2x squared is equal to 2 times x times x. Both of these can be combined. So we can have a letter next to a letter and a number next to those letters. For example, 4x squared y cubed is equal to 4 times x times x times y times y times y. So we can also have something like 4 squared 3 cubed, which is equal to 4 times 4 times 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, so the invisible one. If there is no number next to a letter, example x squared, we assume the number is 1. If there is no index next to a letter or number, we assume that for example 4x, we assume the index is 1. We never say 1a squared or 4b to the first, right? We never say that. So 3x cubed is equal to 3 times x times x times x, and x cubed is equal to 1, that invisible one that we spoke about, times x times x times x. And so I told you this, I'm telling you about the invisible one, because x to the 0 is equal to 1. Since we have 0 x's, any number raised to the 0th power is equal to 1. So adding and subtracting indices. So what we need to know, similar indices can be added or subtracted. Example, x plus 3x or 3y squared minus y squared. Indices that are different cannot be added or subtracted. And an example would be 4x minus x squared or 3y squared plus 2y. We add or subtract the coefficient, which is a number before the letter, and we keep the letters with their respective indices. So an example, x plus 3x is equal to 4x. Remember, x is the same as saying 1x. So 1 plus 3 is equal to 4. 3y squared minus y squared is equal to 2y squared. Remember, we'd say 3 minus 1 because there's an invisible 1 beside the y squared. So multiplying and dividing indices. Let's start with multiplying. When we multiply terms with indices, what we do, we add the indices. For example, x squared times x cubed is equal to x to the 2 plus 3, which is equal to x to the 5th power. And the proof for that is that x squared times x cubed is equal to, open bracket, x times x. That is what x squared is equal to. And then x times x times x is what x cubed is equal to. So since the indices tells us how many times the number is multiplying itself, we can count the number of x's, and we get 5 x's. So we say x to the 5th power, which means that x is multiplying itself 5 times. So another thing about multiplying indices is another example. 4x squared y cubed times 3x cubed y. So what do? We multiply the constants and we add the indices, and we get 12x to the 5th, y to the 4th. So let's prove this. So 4x squared y cubed times 3x cubed y is equal to 4 times x times x times y times y times y. All of that is multiplying 3 times x times x times x times y. So let's group the like terms. So 4 times 3 times x times x times x times x times x times y times y times y times y. Since the index tells us how many times the number is multiplying itself, we can count off the x's and y's. And what do we end up with? We know that 4 times 3 is 12, right? And we know that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 x's, so x to the 5th, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 y's, so y to the 4th power. So let's look at another thing. So we're going to look at division now. When we divide indices, if when we add them, when we multiply them, we add them. What do we do when we divide? We subtract, because that's the opposite operation. So we would subtract the indices. For example, x to the 4th divided by x is equal to x to the 4 minus 1. Because remember that x by itself means x to the 1st, but we don't write that. We don't write to the 1st. So we know that 1 is the index of x and 4 is the index of x to the 4th. So 4 minus 1 will give us 3. So x to the 4th divided by x is equal to x cubed. And the proof, x to the 4th divided by x. So we're going to turn this into a fraction so we can look at it better. So that will be equal to x times x times x times x all over x, and x cancels x. So we have 1 at the bottom and we have 3x multiplying each other at the top. So we end up with x times x times x, which is the same as saying x cubed. So we get x cubed as the answer. So multiplying and dividing indices, let's look at another example. 3x squared divided by x squared. Now this is a special example that I want you to understand, so you understand, as I said before, that x to the 0th power, any number to the raised to the 0th power, is equal to 1. So x squared divided by 3x squared divided by x squared is equal to 3 times x to the 2 minus 2, and 2 minus 2 is equal to 0. So 3x to the 0 is equal to 3 times 1, which is equal to just 3. So another example in dividing. 4x to the 4th y cubed divided by 3x squared, 3xy squared. Okay, so as you can see the example, so we divide the constants and subtract the indices and we get 2x cubed y. Let's prove this. So what we actually have when we turn this into a fraction, so it's easier to understand, is 4 times x times x times x times x times y times y times y, and all of that will go over 2 times x times y times y. So first thing we do, we try and cancel. 2 into itself, 2 into 2 goes 1 time, 2 into 4 goes 2 times. X cancels x, y cancels y, y cancels y. So what are we left with? 2 times x times x times x times y. Since the index tells us how many times the number is multiplying itself, we can count off the x's and y's, and we get 2x cubed y. So another important thing to note in doing algebra, or basically maths, is what is called BOMDAS or BODMAS. You may hear other terms, but these are the terms that I'm going to be using, and these might be the terms that your teacher is using. If there's another term that is being used, you can leave it in the comments below. Also remember to subscribe for more. So when we talk about BOMDAS or BODMAS, we're talking about the order of operation. So BOMDAS or BODMAS tells us the order in which we must carry out mathematical operation. It is important in doing any form of mathematical operation coming up with the correct answer. So BOMDAS. What is BOMDAS? BOMDAS is brackets of multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, or BODMAS is equal to brackets of division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. Now the reason is that you have different levels. You have, I think it's four levels. So bracket is on a level, that's the first level. Off is on the second level. Multiplication and division are on the same level. So you can do either multiplication first or division first. Addition and subtraction are also on the same level. So you can do either addition first or subtraction first. And doing it that way, you'll get the correct answer. If you do it sequentially, your answer may not be correct. This is important in doing math. So if you don't use this method, your answer might be incorrect. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. And these examples you will see coming on screen right now. I won't be calling them out here because trust me, it's really going to take a toll. So just look at the examples on the screen. You can go ahead and write these down. As usual, I'm going to go through each of these examples one at a time, and then we're going to give you 20 seconds for you to work them out, and then I'll work them out on screen. So go ahead, and your 20 seconds starts now. Okay, so now let's look at this example. Negative 3x squared y plus 2xy times 3x. So, as I said before, the order of operations, BOMDAS or BODMAS, is going to be important in how we solve this example. So, the first thing we need to do is multiply, right? Because we don't do we don't solve this sequential, so we're not going to try and add 2 negative x squared y and 2xy. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply. So negative 3x squared y plus open bracket 2xy times 3x. So let's work out the 2xy by 3x, and what we end up with is negative 3x squared y plus 6x squared y. So now we can do our addition and our subtraction. And once we have done that, what we end up with is 3x squared y. Now these both terms have indices that are identical, x squared y, and so we can subtract. Let's look at this next example. That's on screen. Do that, and I'll be back in 20 seconds. Alright, so let's move on to this example. Let's look at this example. We have x squared minus 4y squared times 8x cubed divided by 2xy squared. So the first thing we need to do is our multiplication and our division. Now, one of the best ways to do this is to turn all of the multiplication and division into this huge fraction. So we end up with x squared minus 4y squared times x cubed over 2x squared. So all of that is in brackets. So let's go. So the first thing we can do is we can cancel. So 2 into itself into 2 goes 1, and then 2 into 4 goes 2 times. So we end up with x squared minus 2 times 8, because those are the coefficient or the constants that appear at the top. So 2 times 8, then 3x, because we use x because x is closer to the beginning of the alphabet. We say xy, we don't usually say yx. Okay, so now we have here 3 minus 1. So the 3 is the 3 at the top, and the 1 is the 1 at the bottom. So as we said before, when we divide, we take away the indices, and then we have y to the 2 minus 2. So as we explained before, any number raised 2 minus 2 is 0, and any number raised to the 0th power is equal to 1. So what we end up with is x squared minus 16x, and when we do our subtraction, which is the last thing that we have to do now, we end up with minus 15x squared. Let's move on to our next example. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Remember, you can always pause the video if you need more time, and afterwards I'll show you how to work out this one. Okay, so let's look at this. Open bracket, 2x plus x times 3x squared. So the first thing we need to do is we must work out what is in the brackets. Before we do anything else, we need to work out what's in the brackets. So we say 2x plus x and times 3x squared. So what is 2x plus x? That is 3x. So what we end up with now is 3x times 3x squared. So now we can do our multiplication, and when we do our multiplication, we realize we multiply the numbers by each other, so 3 times 3, and for the x we add the indices. So as we said before, if there is no number, then the number is 1, so x to the 1, so 1 plus 2. And once we have done that, once we add the indices, we end up with 9, so 3 3s 9x, and 1 and 2 is 3, so we end up with 9x cubed. So look at this next example and take 20 seconds or so to do this one, and then I'll show you how to work it out on screen. Right, so let's look at this one. Open bracket, 4y squared minus y squared, all divided by 2y. So what's the first thing that we need to do? We must work out whatever is in the brackets, right? First, because brackets supersede multiplication and division. Multiplication and division supersede addition and subtraction. So we work out what's in the bracket first, and we know that what we do is we subtract if the indices are the same, we subtract the coefficient or the constants, and we keep the indices part. So we keep the y squared part, but we subtract 1 from 4, because as we said before, 1y squared is the same as y squared. So we have 4 minus 1 times y squared divided by 2. So what we end up with is 3y squared divided by 2y. So now we can go ahead and do our division, and one of the best ways to look at division is by using fractions, right? So what we end up with is 3y squared over 2y, and so what we end up with is, now 2 and 3 cannot cancel each other out because they have no common factors, so we're going to keep 3 over 2 as a fraction. We could do, say, 1.5 or 1.5, but we're going to keep 3 over 2 since we just want to simplify this expression. So now the y squared, we have 2 at the top and we have 1 at the bottom. Remember that if it's at the bottom, then that means that the index is 1. So we take away the 1 from the 2, and we end up with our answer, which is 3 over 2y. So that's our answer, right? So let's look at this next one. Go ahead and try this one. Pause the video if you need more time and work this one out, and then I'll show you how to work it out on screen. So this one, 2x over 3y of 12x squared y cubed. So the first thing, what does off mean? When we say off, if we say half of 12, how do we get that? We actually multiply. So we multiply half by 12, and that's what we're going to do in this case. We change the off to multiply, and what we have here is 2x over 3y times 12x squared y cubed. And what we do, we change that to one huge fraction because it's easier to deal with fractions, and we group the like terms. So at the top, what we have is 2 and 12, so we group those together, so those will multiply each other. Then we have the x's, so we're going to add the indices. So in the first case we have 1, because 2x is the same as 2x to the first, so we have 1 plus 12x squared, so that's 2, so 1 plus 2 times, there's only one y at the top, which is y cubed, and then at the bottom now we have 3y. So work that out, and what we end up with is 24 x cubed y cubed over 3y, and we're going to simplify that. So how do we simplify that? We say 3 into itself goes 1 time, 3 into 24 goes 8 times. So what we end up with is 8x cubed, because there is no x at the dividing or at the bottom, y cubed minus 1. So y to the 3 minus 1, because there's 3y at the top and there's 1 at the bottom. And then when we work that out, we get our final answer to be 8x cubed y squared. So look at this next one, and pause the video if you need more time. For now, here's 20 seconds. Okay, so let's look at this one. Alright, so we can work out the numbers. You can just work out the numbers and just get some huge numbers, but the numbers are similar structure. The number are the same, and so because of that, we can still use the laws of indices that I have explained to you to work them out without having to get into these huge number. For example, 4 squared is 16 and 3 cubed is 27. So we wouldn't have to multiply 16 by 27. We are going to use the law of indices to work this one to work this one out. So the first thing we need to do is, rewrite our expression, and we are going to rearrange it a bit. So because what do we know? We know that when we divide indices, we should subtract the indices. So we have 4 to the first and we have 4 squared. So we are going to subtract the 1 from the 2. We know we have 3 cubed and we have 3 squared. We're going to subtract the 3. We're going to subtract the 2 from the 3. And then we have x cubed y squared. There's nothing that can multiply those, so we are going to keep those as they are. When we work that out, we end up with 4 to the first, 3 to the first. times x cubed y squared. And when we work that out, we are going to work out the 4 and the 3 now to a single digit. So 4 times 3 is times x cubed y squared, and we end up with 12 x cubed y squared. Okay, so here's another one, and again you have 20 seconds to work this one out. Okay, let's work this one out. This one is going to be a bit interesting. So what we have is negative 2xy squared plus 7x minus 3y plus 4x y squared. So no multiplication, only subtraction and addition. So what's the first thing we need to do? We need to group like terms. We need to group the terms so we can see them together, and therefore we can work on them together. So we grouping them, we get minus 2xy squared plus 4xy squared. Those are identical, and so those can interact. We can add those or we can subtract them. Plus 7x minus 3y. Those are not like terms. They don't match anything else in this expression, and so we cannot manipulate them. We can't get them any simpler. We can't do anything to them. And so what we're going to do, we're going to do our addition and our subtraction on the parts that we can manipulate. And so what we end up with is 2xy squared plus 7x minus 3, and there's our answer. So here's another one. Take 20 seconds and I'll be back in a jiffy. Right, let's go ahead and look at this one now. Alright, so 3x cubed plus 4 minus 3 minus x cubed. So the first thing we want to do, as before, is to group like terms. Now, one thing to note, right, is that every term, the whatever operation is in front of a term, it will take that operation with it when you group. So we have 4 minus x cubed. So if we are moving this x cubed, then it has to take the minus sign with it. And so in grouping these, what we end up with is 3x cubed minus x cubed plus 4. Now the x cubed can interact with each other, the 4 cannot. So we are going to do our operations on those, and then we're going to leave the 4 as it is. So we end up with 3 minus 1, because the 3x cubed is 3 and the x cubed is 1. and we get 2x cubed plus 4. So here's another one. Join the class, of course. Join the class. The link will be in the description below. The class ID is NSIGA5P, and you can join that class. That's 9th grade math. So if you need any assistance in math, you can join that class. Of course, I'll be putting an assignment on this topic in there, and that will be due October 9th, 2020. If you are watching this video after and you want to go ahead, it will still be there. If you want to go ahead and do it then you can go ahead and do that and send it, and I'll mark it and you will get it back. Private lessons are available, but you'll have to call or WhatsApp 876-405-8217 or 210-9750 or 561-1580. You can also send us an email, TutorsJamaica@gmail.com. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe. So how can you contribute? Well, you can contribute by sending flow credit to 876-405-8217 or 876-210-9750. You may send funds via MyCash using the phone number 876-561-1580, or you can send funds via Western Union to me using the details now on the screen. Also, one of the most important thing is you can always call for further details, but one of the most important contribution that you can make is you can subscribe, you can share the link, you can like this video, watch this video, right, and then give me feedback, give me some comments down below to let me know if you're understanding or if there's any topic that you would like me to cover. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Have a great one.